Today, we are going to look at in detail about the secure firewall. Okay, and I might use the terms interchangeably throughout the training, okay, or throughout the sessions. So sometimes I might call it secure firewall. A lot of times I'll just call it FTD because that's the name that everyone is kind of aware about, and then it's much easier to pronounce it. But irrespective of the fact, it's one and the same thing. So secure firewall, how did ASA evolve into FTD, which is our next generation firewall? Okay. Now, ASA, as mentioned, it is a layer 3, layer 4 stateful firewall. Okay. So no layer 7 capabilities. There are a little bit of layer 7 capabilities in it as well, but it's not a next generation firewall. Okay, so it it is not application aware. Okay, and it does not have that reputation, URL, web content filtering, etc. So it cannot do a lot of those things. Now, there used to be an open source project in the, I think it was 995, 998 period. There was an open source project. Okay, this project was created by a gentleman by the name of, I think that's how you write his last name, Martin Roche. Okay, he wrote an open source IPS solution, IPS IDS, okay, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection system. This was called as SNOT. So this was an open source project. Martin created it. I believe he created it for his own self as a small project. Since it was open sourced, it was shared out into the security community and it was very well received. Okay, so what Martin did was Martin then commercialized this and started selling it kind of like a retail as well with specific hardware products and everything. Okay, so he started selling it through hardware appliances, and he set up an organization which was called as SourceFire. Okay, sorry, it was called as SourceFire. Now, and we're talking about this in the 2001 time period. Okay, SourceFire was acquired by Cisco. Cisco acquired this in 2013. Okay, so what Cisco aimed to do with this, they already had a successful ASA product. Okay, the only part missing was the IPS IDS and that next generation firewall solution. So what Cisco did was they combined the ASA with SNOT. Okay, so they already had their ASA, they acquired SourceFire, they added SNOT. This is what for them became initially as firepower. Okay, so initially what Cisco used to do is they used to sell hardware appliances for ASA, and then they used to sell a SNOT as a module. Okay, it was a plug-in module, just like you have with the NIC cards and everything. So that used to plug into the ASA. And anytime you need to have that layer 7, the ASA internally would forward the traffic to SNOT, where SNOT would do all the inspection and everything, the policies and everything. And then SNOT will send the traffic back to ASA, and then the ASA will send the traffic out. Okay, so this used to be a firepower module. Okay, that's how I try to do this initially. A couple of years down the line, they merged both the codes together. Okay, so ASA and SNOT, they were running separately. Okay, so what they did was they merged both the products together, and that's where FTD came from. And they called it, obviously, Firepower Threat Defense. Okay. Now, obviously, initially there were a lot of hiccups because you are trying to merge two different products together. So there were a lot of bugs, a lot of problems, a lot of performance issues in the earlier days or the initial adoption of the product. But as time went on, the device, the code was kind of perfected, it was enhanced, things were improved, and the way that the product stands today, okay, it's very stable, new features are coming out, it's very good in performance as well. Okay, so I started working on Firepower back when it was on 6.0 version, okay, which is super old. Okay, currently we are sitting at 7.3, and this kind of took, I believe, a good 5 to 8 years of, me seeing how the product has developed through the years. Okay, so from the ASA, Cisco got basically your layer 3, layer 4 ACLs, the VPN capability, the NAT capability, routing capability, and there's something that we call as a pre-filter capability. Okay, this is the ICE side of things. ASA side of things. Okay, ASA was also used to be called as Lena. Okay, so whatever the ASA does, we basically term it as a Lena engine. Okay, SNOT, on the other hand, Firepower, it basically gave access control, advanced inspection, security intelligence. Okay, don't worry about any of the terms. We will be talking about these in much more detail later on. IP address, URL, DNS security. Okay, then malware protection. Okay, and some of the other things. So you can see what ASA used to do and what's SNOT used to do. Okay, and when we combine both of these products together, we basically had kind of like a unified product here. Okay, which obviously you can call it as a next generation firewall, which does everything that ASA used to do, and then it also does what SNOT used to do. Okay, so right now, when you try to log in and try to work with FTD, you don't really, or you won't be able to tell the difference between or what part of the device is the ASA, what part of the device is not. Okay, there is a way to do that as well, and I'll show you from the CLI how we can get into the ASA only CLI, etc. Okay, and after some years now, last year, maybe a couple of years ago, they kind of renamed this to what we now know it as Cisco Secure Firewall. Okay, so that's basically your Secure Firewall. Now, from a feature perspective, everything I've already discussed a lot of these. Okay, so it does provide a lot of these things, but I'll still just mention some of the other features that we have within the firewall. So one of them We can call them as threat and visibility features. Okay, some of them we have already mentioned, things like IP address, URL, DNS protection. Okay, then the next generation firewall is also application aware. Okay, so it is able to do that through Open App ID. Okay, so this basically consists of application detectors through which the firewall can detect applications. Okay, we can also integrate it with a lot of other things. Okay, one of them is for your malware protection, protect against viruses and everything, file-based malware, network-based malware, etc., endpoint-based malware, etc. Okay, so this used to be called as AMP or Advanced Malware Protection. This has also been kind of renamed and everything. Okay. Right. So these would be your threat and visibility features. Okay. The next thing would be you can very flexibly deploy the firewall in various different deployment areas, and I'll share the I'll go over the use cases of how do you do it on the internet edge, etc., etc. You can obviously do automation. You can call it threat defense automation. Okay. One of the kind of automation features that we have for analysis of event analysis and everything is analysis is your correlation policies. Okay. You can also do remediation. And remediation basically means something bad happened, how do we correct it? Okay, so that's remediation. So you can do remediation again through correlation policies. It can be done through reporting, and it can also be done through API. Okay. The general firepower operations, basically, they can be handled and they can be worked through APIs as well, right? So if you need to do any policies, if you need to do any rule updates, okay, software updates, anything operational based, you can still utilize your APIs, or you can do your automation. Okay. Now, how can we deploy this, or how we can, or let me just give you a platform overview. Okay, what are the different ways in which the product is available from Cisco? Call this okay. We first talk about the hardware platforms. Okay, and depending upon what your market is, okay, or where do you want to deploy it, the different types of devices or appliances available. So, for example, we have the Firepower 1010 series. This is meant for SOHOs or small branches. Okay. We also then have the Firepower 1100 series, okay, which is meant for mid-size businesses, mid-size enterprises, mid-size businesses. Okay. We also have the 2100 series, which is meant for large enterprises. Moving forward, we have 3100 series, which are meant for large enterprises, and they also want to focus on VPNs. Okay, if we have large enterprises and they also want to do a lot of VPN, then basically can opt for the 3100 series because it improves on the VPN throughput. Okay, I think this gives around 40 gigs per second of VPN throughput. Okay, so these previous ones, they are sub 4 Gbps. Okay, this one can be to 40 Gbps. We then have the FPR 4100 series. This is meant for large data centers. Okay, and finally, we have the most expensive devices, which are the 9300 series. Okay, these are typically meant for managed security service providers or MSSPs, okay, or in general service provider or very high density data centers. Okay, but typically this would not be a focus for data centers. This is primarily the focus for service providers, the FPR 9300 series. Okay, there is no difference in terms of features in any of these devices. The difference in the actual throughput. Okay, so obviously the large devices, specifically 9300, 4100 series, they provide much more throughput than the rest of the devices. Okay, so mainly that's where the difference is in the actual performance and the throughput. Okay, you also have the option to do these as virtual appliances. Hardware appliances. Okay, you also have the option to do virtual. Which is what we will be using in the lab environment. Okay, so both private and public clouds are supported. Okay, so when I basically say public cloud, they obviously include AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI. Okay, OCI is basically Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Okay, if we talk about our private clouds, it basically includes things like our VMware ESXi, okay, KVM, and also your Nutanix AHV. Okay, so virtual platform, again, you can do it in different ways, different sizes. The maximum throughput that you can get with these is around 10 Gbps. Okay, so typically these would be meant for your up to this large deployments, okay? Not for large data centers and definitely not for service providers, okay? And also the virtual side of deployments would be preferred by organizations who already have some sort of infrastructure set up. So for example, if someone tries to use virtual firewalls in, let's say, ESXi, then obviously if he already has, or the organization already has, an ESXi environment already present, great. Otherwise, the cost to acquire those servers, licensing for ESXi, and then on top of that, adding the firewalls and licensing for that, it'll be much more expensive than just purchasing the hardware appliance. Okay, so it really depends upon what the customer and what the organization already has. Okay, and versus what they're really trying to do and what they're trying to acquire, and obviously the budget. Okay, typically the capex. Now, in addition to this, there are also some appliances that are meant for industries, okay, industrial location like factories, mills, etc. We can call this IoT and OT appliance. Can no one hear my voice? Guys, can everyone confirm if my voice is audible?
Yeah, audible.
Okay. Rishabh, try to join in again. I think might be a problem with your internet or. All right, so let's continue. So IoT and OT appliances. And I'll show these appliances to you once at Cisco's website as well, just so that you're aware. So these are basically meant for, again, your factories. Okay, obviously IoT and OT places. Okay, there's only a single appliance that basically is provided by Cisco. These are the ISA 3000 series, and they're very rugged looking appliances, right? Something that will not get affected by high temperatures that you get in factories and everything. Okay, so in factories typically you won't have air conditioned or temperature controlled environments which are necessary for devices. Okay, so these are made in such a way that the temperatures and everything are not going to get affected. Okay, organizations like Omron, right, Rockwell, Schneider, GE, Siemens, etc. These are the ones which deploy the ISA 3000 series in their factories. Okay, they're basically meant for industrial networks, protect the industrial automation, IoT things from potential threats and everything, and also have compliance for those. Okay, so these are your different options in which we really have our hardware appliances. And let's just head over to, I'm going to bring in a browser here. Let's go over to cisco.com so that we can actually take a look at some of these. Okay, so anytime you have to grab anything, any information about a product, any solution, everything, always a good place to start at Cisco's own website. Okay, so if you come into products and services, right, you have a bunch of different options here. Our interest is in security for now. Okay, and in here you have a multitude of different products. Okay, you have industrial security, cloud and application, network, everything. You have secure firewall here. Okay, a couple of others that we will discuss in our training is ICE and Umbrella as well. Okay, but for now we'll just take a look at secure firewall. Okay, so these are the different series that we have for our firewall. Okay, so 1000 series for small branches, 3100, 4100. There is a new 4200 series as well. Okay, 9300, these are the most expensive ones, like I mentioned. Then you have virtual. Okay, so you can.
Sorry, not showing 2100.
2100. Okay, yeah, they might have removed it or something. So I think they might have removed 2100 and they might have replaced it with 4200. Okay.
Okay.
So 1000, they are for small businesses. 3100 series, they are for medium-sized enterprises. Okay. Then you have these ISA 3000s, which are for manufacturing, industrial, and operational environments. Then you have some cloud native, and there's some other options for WAF and etc. So let me just open this one as well. Okay, so this is what the 3000 series looks like. Okay, it is a modular chassis. Okay, and when I say modular, I basically mean that all of these components here that you see with these screws around them, okay, all of these components, you can obviously, since it's modular, you can buy high capacity NICs. So for example, maybe if you have 40 gigs of links in your network, you can get 40 gigs of NIC cards. Okay, if you have maybe lower throughput links, maybe 10 gig, 5 link, you can get those and you can use them. Okay, and this is where you have your these are basically called as, so these are called as NMs or network modules. Okay, so you have 2 network modules that you can add. Okay, and then you can add up to 3 security modules or SMs. Okay, so this is 1, this is 2, and then this here is the 3rd SM module. Okay, and on each of these SM modules, you can run 1 instance of firepower or FTD. So if a service provider has a single 9300 chassis, he can run 3 firewall simultaneously. Okay, so that's why it's typically used in service providers, in MSSPs. Okay, so if they are serving multiple customers, they don't have to buy hundreds of firewall appliances to serve 100 customers. They can maybe do 50 or 25 or 20 appliances, and they can have those many firewalls. Okay, so you can have 2 NM modules, 2 network modules, and 3 SM modules. Okay, and right below here, these 2 are your redundant power supplies, RPSs. Okay, and this is where is your supervisor. Okay, and when I say supervisor, I obviously mean this is the brain of the chassis. This is what monitors the chassis. Okay, for temperature, for any faults, links going down, cables going bad, fans not working, etc., etc. Okay, and managing the firewall altogether. Okay, so this is the most expensive device that Cisco has to offer in terms of the firewall. Okay, and this is the ISAs. This is for the industries. Okay, so if you're going to see, obviously they are very rugged looking because of the way that the temperatures and everything are there in the factories and everything. Okay. Okay. Reset this. And here, if I go down here, you can see the different options that you have for your SM modules. Okay, so you can buy SM40, SM48, or SM56. Again, this is dependent upon throughput. Okay, so 40 provides 55 Gbps of throughput, whereas 56 is going to provide 70 Gbps of throughput. So each of these SM modules will go into one of these.
Sorry.
Yes.
Just what exactly meaning of this throughput, like 40 GB, 30 GB? What exactly meaning of that?
It's the bandwidth of how much traffic can flow through the firewall simultaneously. Okay, so
not a
70
one
Gbps.
port. It is like whole, like
SFPs.
total data plane throughput, no?
Right. Data plane throughput.
So in one time it can manage 40 GB data.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So Arun also mentioned in the chat window the traffic that can come in and move out of the firewall. So basically any traffic that's flowing through the firewall. Okay. So this much traffic that particular module can handle. Okay. So that's really your throughput there. Okay. Now, talking about from the perspective of the actual the architecture. Okay. Talking about from the perspective of the architecture, as in the software architecture, and I'll cover it from the perspective of the chassis, because there are a couple of additional components that come into when we're talking about the actual chassis. So if we talk about software architecture, and it's from the perspective of, again, the chassis. So at the very bottom layer here, okay, you basically have running a UCS context. Okay, and remember, the if anyone has any experience with Cisco data center side of things, they have their data center servers, UCS, Unified Cloud Computing. These Firepower chassis are kind of inspired by the UCS servers themselves. Okay, so if you have experience with the UCS CLI and everything, if you will use the Firepower CLI, they're very similar. Okay, so that's why there is a UCS context right at the bottom layer. Okay, so let me just write this here. The Firepower chassis utilizes, let's just call it a hybrid UCS architecture. Okay, and they make use of fabric interconnects internally. Okay, so the bottommost layer we have for UCS context, this is the default context. Okay, so whenever you try to SSH or console into the Firepower chassis, okay, you basically are put into the UCS context. Okay, and then from this context, you can then connect to the various components within the firewall. Okay, so on top of this runs the base OS for the chassis, which is FXOS. Okay, FXOS is really this is where basically the fabric interconnect lives. Okay, so in the UCS context, when you SSH or log into the chassis, from the UCS context, you can connect to the FXOS context through the connect command on the CLI. Okay, now on top of this, then you basically have your security modules. Okay, and also you have basically your network modules. This is where you would run FTD, and I'll just say it runs as a container. Okay. So this is kind of like a software architecture for your firepower chassis. Typically, all of the chassis that we have, right, they kind of are this way. Only the 9300 series is really hardcore modular. A lot of these rest of the ones, they are basically, they're hard soldered. Okay, so you cannot change the network modules, you cannot add anything additional, you cannot add more security modules to it. Okay. The rest of the chassis, they can run only a single instance or a single firewall image. Okay, 9300 can run up to 3 firewalls simultaneously. Okay, so the FXOS context, the UCS context. FXOS stands for, let's call it Firepower Extensible Operating System. Okay. So again, whenever you SSH or console, you do it into the UCS context, okay, or the UCS layer. So whenever I'm saying a context, just think of that as the layer, okay. From this layer, you can issue a connect command, and then you can connect to FXOS context. The most preferred way of managing this is obviously through the web, okay. So you typically are going to manage this through the FXOS web page. So FXOS is managed through FCM, which is Firepower Chassis Manager. Okay, through the FCM, you can monitor the firewall, you can set up alerts, okay, you can configure these security modules, you can configure the network modules, okay, you can do upgrades for FXOS. Okay, you can see if fans are not working, current power supply is not working, there is any issues with any of the interfaces are flapping, etc., etc. So all of that you do through the FCM. Okay. So since it says chassis manager, obviously it is used to manage the chassis, not the firewalls. Okay. Not the firewalls or the FTDs running in it. It's only used to manage the chassis as a whole. Okay. Now, your firewalls get installed as containers. How do you manage the actual firewalls? Okay. So there are a couple of ways to manage the firewalls. One of the ways is to do it through local management, or we call it on-box. So the firewall, they already come pre-installed with an application, a web application, a software, which allows you to manage that particular firewall. Okay, so it's local management. You can only manage the single firewall that you are trying to access. Okay, this is basically called as FDM or Secure Firewall Device Manager. Earlier, it used to be called as Firepower Device Manager. So I'm writing both the new names and the old names as well. Okay, that's on box, local management. You can only manage a single firewall through this. Okay, it's good for small businesses, small organizations. Maybe my small business only has 2 firewalls, right? I can manage both of them individually through FDM. And you don't need to install or add anything additional to the firewall. Okay, so once you have the chassis, or once you have maybe deployed it in virtual machine, you can just manage it locally. Okay, it already comes pre-installed with whatever application is really required.
Sorry, yeah, like FDM is any physical device or a software inbuilt in?
It's a software inbuilt to the firewall.
Standalone firewall.
That's right, standalone firewall. Let me also mention standalone management. Okay. The next way to do it is through out-of-band or centralized management. This is going to be the most preferred way to do management for most organizations, because this helps you to manage multiple firewalls simultaneously. Okay, FMC. The new name for this is Secure Firewall Management Center. Okay, the older name for this was Firepower Management Center. Okay, so this is a separate device. Okay, so FMC is going to be a separate device. You have various options. This can either be hardware appliance, or you can have it virtually. Just like we saw with ESXi and everything, you can install it virtually, or you can purchase separate hardware appliances for it, okay, for FMC. So I believe currently we have 4,500, 2,100 available, okay? There might be a couple of additional ones as well. Let me just check in here. Okay, so let's come into security. I'm going to go into all security products, and then let's see firewall here. Let me see if I get the option for management. This is where the management is, secure firewall management. Don't have a link for it. Let me open this at 300. Okay, solution, technology. There we go. Secure firewall management. We have hardware, private, public cloud, and cloud delivered as well. Let's look at the data sheet here. And okay, so the bunch of new options in here as well. So we have 1600 series, 2600, 4600, 1700, and it really depends upon how many devices you're trying to manage. Okay, so for example, this, it can manage 50 firewalls, and firewalls are typically, or can also be called as sensors. So that's what you see here, number of sensors that it can manage. Okay, and the highest one here, it can manage up to 1,000 firewalls through a single appliance or through a single hardware. Okay. And there's some other events, some other specs that you can really have mentioned in here.
Sorry,
yes.
Can you brief this comparison and features of the FMC?
For the FMC, primarily the the reason for the FMC is again to manage the firewalls. Okay, so the lowest available chassis can manage up to 50 firewalls, and the
Yes.
highest chassis here can manage up to 1,000 firewalls. Okay, and then it also depends upon how many events or logs that it can have. So, for example, the FMC 1600 can have a maximum of 30 million IPS events, whereas
Okay.
the FMC 4700 can have 400
Oh,
million events. Okay, so it really depends upon, obviously, since it's a bigger chassis, it will have more storage, it will have more processing power, etc. Okay, so if you're
and
going to see
one more thing. Third
this
one is important, na?
this one.
Yes, management interface.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we will use the management for management IP series. I'm just curious about like that two firewalls in our environment, like two firewalls
Right,
managed by FMC 16.
right.
So if I am not able to take accessing of that firewall, so
Mm-hmm.
there is any like console port available on that FMC, or I have to take that FTD directly from firewall.
So if you are talking about just the general access, then the FMC can be accessed through console port, through SSH, etc. Okay, and through the web. If you're talking about managing the firewall, then you cannot manage the firewall through the FMC CLI.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Got it.
so in order to manage the firewall, you would need to have access to the FMC's web page.
So just query is a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like that. Anyhow, my FMC is not accessible. Okay.
Okay.
So one option I have that I can take that FTD login or FTD access via console port from FMC. Am I right?
No, you cannot do it from the FMC. You can take direct access for the CLI through the FTD CLI itself, but you cannot make any changes to the FTD's configuration through the CLI.
Okay. Actually, what scenario is like that? We have FMC only in standalone. Okay, and
Okay.
two firewalls
Right.
are integrated with it. So
Right.
what my question is like that? If FMC got hardware is got failed. So
Right.
what option we do have that access the FTD? So
You don't really have any option. So if your FMC goes down,
okay.
if your FMC's web page is not accessible, then you will need to bring up the FMC to be able to manage the FTD. Your firewalls will continue to work. Okay. So
Yeah.
your production network is not going to get affected if the FMC goes down. Okay.
Okay.
What is going to get affected is no new policy changes can be done on the firewall without the FMC, and any logs that will be generated by the FTD, you won't be able to see those logs on the FMC. If you have the FTD integrated with something like a syslog, or you're sending it to any SIEM solution, then that will continue to work. But if you are just sending the logs from the FTD to the FMC, that part will not work unless your FMC comes back up. Okay. So
I
your
think this
FTD,
is also critical, na?
right. So if I compare this from the perspective of something like, let's say, Palo Alto, right? So if you're using, let's say, Panorama to manage firewalls, you can also manage the firewall locally, right? In case of firepower, that's not the way it works. So you either manage it locally or you manage it through the FMC. You cannot manage it both ways. So if the firewall becomes integrated with FMC, then it's only the FMC that can make changes to the configuration. There is no option for you to go into the CLI of the FTD and do any changes.
Okay, so like emergencies like it, we have to get it own like FMC hardware, FMC appliances.
Right.
If
so right now, what's
any console port have FMC have any console port?
It does have console port, yes. You should be able to console it, obviously. And what's the chassis? 1600?
Yes, 1600. 2130 is Firewall, and 600 1600 is FMC.
Right. Okay. So you should be able to log into FXOS context as well on the FMC. Okay. So you should be able to do that as well. If not, then you can go into the console, try to do a restart or a reboot, etc. You can do that as well. Okay. But you cannot manage anything from the CLI. You cannot do any configuration changes. Okay. You can see the
And
logs. You can go into the Linux kernel from the CLI. Okay. And you can take logs and everything. You can have TAC troubleshoot through the CLI, but that's really about it. No configuration changes can be done from the CLI. Okay.
So one more question is like this.
Yes.
Internet connectivity. What we in our scenario is like interconnectivity with on FMC and both firewall as well. So what is recommended is like that only FMC have internet connectivity, or either 3 are like that 2 FTD have internet connectivity and FMC as well. So is it recommended or not?
So when we talk about FMC's internet access, FMC's internet access is required from that management interface. So if you're going to look here, FMC only has management interface. It does not have any regular data interfaces.
Okay. Yes.
The management interfaces, the management interface on the FMC is required to connect to Cisco Cloud, basically, for a lot of different things, for licensing. Okay.
Yes.
For smart licensing, it's required to download lots of different rule updates, geolocation updates, and all of those things. Okay. So that's what's required from the FMC's perspective. If you're trying to do security intelligence or you're trying to do URL filtering, then it needs to connect to the Cisco Cloud to verify the reputation and the categories of the URLs and the web content. So FMC really needs all of that going on. And similarly with the FTD as well. Okay. So FTD, obviously you would either have it placed on the internet edge, right? So between users and the internet, you will have the firewalls. Obviously, the FTD would any which ways be connected to the internet. Yes.
Okay. So these are all the things will go through the FMC, no? Any iOS update, any LOS.
Correct. So FTD on the management interface, it does not need to connect to the internet because it directly does not download any updates. All the updates, all the licensing is being managed by the FMC, and then FMC pushes those down to the FTD.
Okay, one more question. It is recommended like that FMC also have in I'd say in redundancy?
It is recommended. Again, this is the FMC HA is really a requirement. It depends upon how big of your deployment you have. Okay. Since you already have just 2 devices or 2 firewalls, I don't think your organization will be able to justify another HA, right? Because it's just two firewalls managing, and if you have 2 devices, then so again, it really comes down to the budgeting. Okay. Sure. I mean, if you want, you should have it. I mean, if I have all the budget in the world, I would probably have everything as HA, but then everything comes down to budgeting. Okay. Maybe if you would be having 100 firewalls or maybe even 50 firewalls, I would say, yes, sure, go ahead with HA. Okay.
So if we don't have FMC in HA, so it is not so bad that we are managing the 2 firewalls in standalone, like primary and secondary. So we can bypass FMC as well.
You could. Again, I don't recommend it because there are lots of features that FMC provides which the local management does not. Okay. So the local management is really very limited, and that's why I typically recommend the local management for small offices. If you are even a substantially mid-sized organization, okay, I would typically keep you on FMC, because with FMC you get a lot more visibility and a lot more things that you can do, and a lot more control that you have with what you can do with the configuration and everything. Okay. Yeah, and when we do the labs and everything, I'll show you, and you will yourself see the difference between how local management it really does not offer that much granularity and that much control that you get with the FMC.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah, if you are really small, okay, then again, that's where the budgeting comes in as well. Okay, so you could either really skip FMC and or you could probably just use FMC virtualized as well.
Okay.
Okay, rather than having appliances. Okay, and you can probably check on this as well, and I'm pretty sure you might be able to do, but if you already have in your organization, let's say an ESXi environment, you already have a single hardware FMC, you can maybe have another FMC virtualized and have them as an HA. Right? Just giving you a suggestion to cut costs if you are trying to, look at maybe going an HA, and obviously budgeting is an issue and you don't want to purchase another FMC appliance. So you can spin up an FMC virtual and then have both of them working as an HA. I think you should be able to do that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, but yes, remember when you do FMC virtual, there is licensing that goes for the FMC virtual as well. With the hardware appliance, there's no FMC licensing. Okay, so again, you need to take into consideration whether the FMC virtual license will be cheaper for you than buying the FMC hardware. Okay, so if that's the case, then sure, you can go ahead and do the FMC virtual for one of the secondary or the passive instance for the FMC. Okay, so I hope that answers some questions. All right. So continuing with this, we have the FMC hardware, and then, like I mentioned, we have FMC virtual as well, which again, this is what our lab is going to look like. There are two variants kind of for this. We have this FMCV, which can support up to 25 sensors. And there is kind of like a very big instance that you can also create virtually, which can manage up to 300 firewalls. Okay, and the specs are given here that you need to provide. Okay, so for example, for this, you need to have a maximum of 32 gigs of memory. For the FMC virtual 300, you need to have a maximum of 64 gigs of memory and 32 virtual CPUs. And then obviously the hard disk and everything also, you need to make sure that you comply with whatever is mentioned in the data sheet. Okay, so anytime you need to reference anything with respect to Cisco in terms of the specs, okay, and it really goes into the compliance and everything, the temperatures and all of those things. If you need to verify, okay, the best place to go is the data sheet. Okay, so for example, here it basically mentions everything, what sort of power supply it is, the weight, dimensions, okay, form factor, etc. So these are not very big chassis. They are just one RU. Okay, so they're just a single rack unit here, so they don't take up a lot of space. When we're talking about the actual firepower or the secure firewall devices here, I think the 9300 would be around 3 or 4 RU. Okay, so it's a very beefy, very big chassis here, and some of these top ones are here 1 RU itself. Okay. Right, so that's the management. And in our lab, we will be focusing on the centralized management. Okay, I will be showing the FDM as well. Okay, so that you can see what the FDM looks like and how it vastly differs than FMC and what FMC has additionally to offer as well. Now, there's one more way in which you can manage your firewalls is cloud-based, or let me just say cloud delivered. Okay, so this is a SaaS, software as a service, which Cisco provides, and this is your CDO. Okay, and if you remember, you would have seen CDO here as well. We did. Okay, so that's the public cloud. Let's see if you can see CDO here. There we go. Defense Orchestrator. Okay. So this is offered as a cloud service by Cisco, again, SaaS. So you don't need to buy any hardware. You don't need to buy anything. You just get licensing. Okay, just get an account or an organization provisioned within the cloud. You get access to this dashboard here. And then from here, you can manage your firewalls. Now, this is useful for if you have huge number of firewalls or lots of different firewalls throughout the world. Okay, so in different geolocations, in different locations throughout the world, you don't want to buy FMCs for every location. Okay, and then manage the firewalls, but you just want to have them managed centralized in one single place, then CDO is your solution. This is your Cisco Defense Orchestrator. Okay. Geo-dispersed firewalls. All right, so this gives you another level of ease in which you can manage your firewalls. You don't need to buy different FMCs. Again, it really comes down to how much control you want. Okay, so a lot of organizations don't want anything to be cloud delivered because any of the logs and everything will be going to the cloud. Okay, so things like where people deal with compliances, things like healthcare, HIPAA, then you have PCI DSS for the for any organizations that deals with credit cards and finances and bank accounts and everything. Okay, typically credit cards. And then in the Europe, you have a very strict policies for GDPR. Okay, your data protection act there. So and then military, DoDs, and all of these things, they don't really or would not want anything to be sent to third-party clouds. Okay, so those are still going to be limited to my FMCs and FTMs. But for the rest of them, if you feel, then you can go to the cloud delivered solution. Okay. Any questions up until now? So Ramesh asked a lot of questions, and I mean, it was kind of like a good thing everyone got to, just, I mean, even if a lot of it did not make sense, which would probably do once we do the rest of the content for the training, but it was kind of like a good conversation. Anyone has any questions before I move forward? Okay. Yes, someone did unmute. All right. Now, use cases for the firewall. A couple of them I've already mentioned, okay, but I'll still just talk about them once again. One of the use cases is the very common one, which is my internet edge. Okay, having the firewall sit at the edge of my network. Okay, sometimes it's called as a DMARC. Okay, this is where you kind of connect or hand off your network to a service provider. Okay, so you would want your firewall sitting right there. Okay, so that anytime any traffic comes in or flows through your network, it can basically be protected by the firewall. Okay, a typical recommendation here is to obviously have these in an HA. Okay, because with just a single firewall, you have a single point of failure. Okay, if this firewall goes down, then you basically have no access, or your users basically have access to nothing. And in today's time, when a lot of things are cloud delivered, hybrid, a lot of reliability on SaaS applications and everything, so it's very important to have high availability. Okay, so HA there. That's going to be your internet edge use cases. Okay, majority of our enterprises now, they require connectivity to the internet. Okay, and in this sort of a use case, you would be kind of implementing almost everything that goes into the firewall's feature set. So, for example, things like security intelligence. Okay, you would want to do SSL or TLS decryption as well, right? You would want to protect your users against any malicious DNS, URL, or IP addresses. So that's sort of a protection. You would want to have application awareness through AVC, application visibility and control. You would also want to protect against any potential malware, so malware protection, and your IPS, so that your users, your network can be protected against signature-based threats. And we'll discuss this when we will talk about IPS and SNOT in detail. Okay. Another use case could probably be in today's time, obviously, would be for remote access VPN. Okay. You want to protect your remote users, your remote workforce from threats as well. Okay, and they could be working from anywhere, right? And they might want to, so let's say this is your data center, which is kind of hosting a lot of different applications, your intranet, basically, okay? And it connects to the internet. You obviously have some users here on the internet, okay, working from home maybe. And maybe they're working from maybe some other remote locations. Okay, now these users would sometimes want to connect back to your data center to access your intranet using obviously corporate devices, okay, their own work devices. And then some of these users would also want to connect to the internet for doing rest of the work, or maybe accessing some SaaS applications. So since these users are at home, or maybe in a coffee shop, or maybe sitting in a park, or maybe in the airport lounge, they are not behind your corporate firewall. Okay, so there needs to be a way in which these can be, or these devices can be protected. Okay, so at your data center or on the internet edge in your organization, you would already have your firewalls here, just like we saw with the internet edge design here. Okay, and these users would now be connecting to these firewalls through remote access VPN. Okay, so there needs to be a way in which these remote users can be protected. Okay, and from Cisco's perspective, the remote access VPN, this is client-based. Okay, so these users, they would have something like Cisco AnyConnect installed. Okay, Cisco AnyConnect has also been renamed or rebranded. So now it's called as Cisco Secure Client. Okay, and AnyConnect, if you don't have much experience with AnyConnect, it's basically a modular software client or an agent. Okay, so it can do a lot of things in addition to VPN. Okay, VPN is its core capability. Okay, but it can do a lot of other things. It can work with ICE. It can work with ASA, it can work with the firewall, it can work with Umbrella, it can work with malware protection, it can do telemetry, etc. So it does a lot of different things. Okay, so you need something like this to be able to help protect your environment or your network.
Basically, one question from my side, like basically what my knowledge is about my knowledge that basically it scan my system, my laptop,
right,
before connecting the my intranet. Am I right? So if it can scan any malicious software in what is scanning is like that any malicious software in my from a corporate laptop. I'm doing work from home, and anything I'm downloading from Gmails or any by mistakenly I downloaded in my laptop from Gmail. So I think it will scan that, and if it does not found any malicious software, then it will allow to connect intra-network.
It depends. It depends. So if your AnyConnect is running AMP enabler.
Yes.
It is running AMP enabler. That's why it's doing that. If it's not running AMP enabler, it will not do the scanning.
So
okay.
in that case, if I have a malicious software in my home, then I'm getting to connect my intra network, my corporate network.
Right.
Then corporate firewall will come in picture, na?
If you're sitting at home, then your corporate firewall does not come into picture, right? If you are sitting in the office where you have, or sitting in the organization and you have the firewall, corporate firewall sitting at the edge, that's when your firewall comes into picture, right?
Okay. Yes. My question is like that. I'm sitting my home, and I connected my VPN, and I did a lot of things that is not recommended by my company,
right?
And downloaded many things that have the malicious software. So my question is simple: that can I able to transfer that malicious software to corporate network after connecting the VPN through VPN that connect like intra network?
Right. It depends. So when you are creating that tunnel, that VPN tunnel between your corporate device and your organization's firewall, okay? It really depends on your VPN tunnel. So there are two ways. The VPN tunnel can either be a split tunnel, okay, or it can be a full tunnel. So when I say split tunnel, it basically means that the AnyConnect is configured in such a way that the corporate traffic or your internet traffic is basically going to be sent to your organization, and your internet traffic will be sent out locally and not through the tunnel. Okay, so if you are doing anything malicious on the internet, and if you have split tunnel configured, then you will be able to download anything that you want, and you are not going to send that traffic to your corporate because that is going to be bypassed. If you're doing full tunnel on the AnyConnect, then every single traffic, be it internet or be it corporate, it flows through your firewall or through your organization. Okay, so that's the difference in way how the AnyConnect or how the tunnel has been set up.
Okay. What I'm understanding is like I have if I have full tunnel, then each and every traffic will will come like I'm using my mobile internet. Then it will go fast, corporate firewall. Then it will then come on my laptop.
Right.
And in split tunnel, that only my traffic going to my intra network will go
correct
to this, and any internet other than internet traffic will will be direct to my laptop.
Correct.
I think it comes in picture that my laptop antivirus will come in picture, no?
Your laptop antivirus, or again, if you have AnyConnect that has the anti-malware protection from Cisco enabled, then that will scan that traffic as well.
Okay. So my curiosity as always is like that. I'm using everything in internet. Then in any corporate laptop they're using from home, then downloading. So I think it is not so vulnerable, na? Like that if they are accessing the intra network.
So what you can do is, if you are going to open up AnyConnect on your laptop, okay?
Yes.
If you open up AnyConnect, if you go into the settings, once you have the tunnel set up, it will mention whether it's split tunnel or whether it's full tunnel. Okay. So if you're curious to know what really is happening and how your corporate policy is set up, you can take a look within the AnyConnect client, and it will actually show you whether you are doing split tunnel or whether you're doing a full tunnel.
Okay. Actually, I'm using both now, AnyConnect and firewalls, Dell firewalls actually. Both VPN are on config to my laptop. So,
okay.
So I'm both using. Okay, no issue, please.
All right. Right. So this was your remote access VPN use case. Then the other use case, obviously, it can be if you want to have the firewall within the data center itself. Okay, because again, securing the data center is, I mean, right now it's kind of like a very evolving kind of a thing. Okay, because you can have a lot of static servers in there, and then you could also be connecting, or a lot of your servers can also be connecting to both public and private cloud as services. Okay, so you would probably want to secure your data center as well. Okay, so you can have the firewalls within the data center itself, right? So for example, let's say this is where your applications reside within your data center, okay? And anytime anyone tries to access these applications, you basically send these through firewalls, okay? So obviously, you would want to have HA here as well. Okay, and then this is where you kind of exit out, or maybe you have some other Nexus devices or Nexus switches here. Okay, and then this is the rest of your network. Okay, so this basically here is your data center. Okay, so you can have the firewall in your data center core. Again, like I mentioned previously, to protect any of your, this typically would be your east-west traffic. Okay, lateral movement. You can also place these firewalls at the edge here of the data center to protect your north-south traffic. Okay. Another use case, it could be for your multi-instance. Okay, I did show you the 9300 chassis, and I told you that it has up to 3 security modules on which we can run up to 3 firewall instances on a single device or a single chassis. And these chassis also have a supervisor, which kind of manages and monitors everything. Okay, so what you can do is you can have your firewalls run multiple instances. Okay, you can run multiple instances, and these are supported only on the 4100 series and the 9300 series chassis. Okay, so for example, one of the modules I can say, hey, this module on this single firewall, I would want this to only serve internet traffic. Okay, and the other instance, I only wanted to serve my intranet traffic. The rest of them, I kind of only want it for my admin kind of thing, etc. Okay, so you can basically have multi-instance kind of a thing. Okay, you can basically split the firewall into multiple small virtual instances. Okay, if anyone here has experience with ASA, within the ASA we used to do the same thing. Okay, it's something similar to VRF. If you have enterprise experience, okay, where you have a single device and you split it up into virtual routers, where each of that virtual instances or each of that VRF gets its own routing table, and you have a global routing table which is different, and there's no communication between two VRFs until and unless you do any sort of VRF route leaking. Okay, same principle here. A single firewall you can split into multiple smaller instances. Okay, a very common approach with MSSPs. Okay, so they can buy 10 9300 chassis, and if you do the math, they have 10, they can run 3 firewalls on one chassis, so that will be 30 firewalls. Okay, and then each of those firewalls, they can further split virtually through multi-instance, and they can serve even more customers with that. And every instance that they create, that traffic remains isolated against the rest of the instances. Okay, so if a single firewall is split into, let's say, 5 instances, and I serve 5 different customers, that traffic remains segregated. There is no inter-instance communication between them. Okay, so That is a very common approach that MSSPs do or service providers do. Okay, and again, it is only supported on 4100 and 9300 chassis. No other chassis. Okay, so yes, if customer really needs to do that, then they will need to buy these bigger chassis for that work. Okay. All right, any questions with respect to these use cases? And before we end it today, I just want to cover the licensing part as well, real quickly once, so that next week we can start with the bootstrapping and then the actual lab and everything. Okay, so yeah, so that's really how the architecture and everything is, from the hardware, the software, and then some of the different use cases that we have. Now, talking about licensing. Okay. There are multiple ways to do licensing. One is deprecated, it's not used, recommended anymore, but I'll still mention it for the sake of it. One is my classic licensing. Okay, this used to be the earlier pack-based licensing. Okay, so you buy a device, it has a serial number, you share the serial number with Cisco licensing. Okay, they generate a pack file, you get the pack file, you do a TFTP or an FTP transfer to the flash and everything. Okay, you install it, reboot, and you're licensed. Right? A lot of you must have done that licensing. This has been deprecated now. Okay. This is still being used by legacy devices. Okay, any older devices, they are still using it, but any newer generation devices, anything new, Cisco recommends everyone who is still using classic license to migrate to the now recommended solution from Cisco, which is smart licensing. Okay, these are account-based, not pack-based. Okay, these are, again, since these are for serial numbers or tied against serial numbers, they are only for specific devices. Smart licensing is not tied to specific devices. Okay, and the way that smart licensing really works is from the perspective of, so whenever you get engaged with Cisco, whenever you buy anything from Cisco, you basically get provisioned a smart account. Okay, you get access to a smart account. This is your organization's account. Within the smart account resides your virtual accounts. And virtual accounts are really based on your different groups within the organization. Okay, so maybe for wireless, you would have a different virtual account. Okay, for VoIP or collaboration, you have a different virtual account. For security, there will be a different virtual account, right? If you're trying to do, let's say, DNAC, SD-WAN, and everything, so for enterprise, you would have a different virtual account. Okay. Specific licenses for specific technologies, they would reside in these specific virtual accounts. Okay, and you can have a lot of different virtual accounts within a smart account, and an organization typically would want to have a single smart account against their complete organization. Helps with the billing and everything, getting support, etc., etc. Okay. Now that's the newer licensing way. The licensing is now again not tied with serial numbers. Okay, you purchase some licenses. So I go to Cisco, I say, hey, I need some firewall licenses. You buy, you pay, and those licenses are added to your smart account and whatever virtual account you ask them to add the licenses to. Okay, there's no need to download the licenses, install on the firewall or any other device, etc. Now, the way that the smart license process, it really works. Your FMC is the one that's the centralized management. Okay, FMC here needs to connect or talk to Cisco SSM. And this connectivity is over HTTPS. It's secure. Okay, so TCP port 443. Okay. SSM is Smart Software Manager. Okay. FMC needs to register with the Cisco SSM, and it needs to tell Cisco SSM what licensing it needs. Okay, so depending upon how many firewalls the FMC is managing, the FMC, once it registers, it's going to say, hey, I need 4 licenses. Okay, in no way this is tied to any serial number or anything. Okay, the Cisco SSM is going to say, okay. All right, taken the fact that obviously you have sufficient licenses in your virtual account. Okay, so if you have like 10 security licenses, 4 are being used. So you're basically going to see in use 4, available 6. Okay, and then your status within the virtual account is going to show up as compliant. All right, so how does this registration and everything happen? Within the virtual account, you generate a registration token. Okay, this registration token is then copied into FMC. That's it. There is nothing additional that is required. Okay, obviously the FMC needs to talk to internet, okay, to be able to do that. But apart from that, there's nothing else that needs to be installed, nothing else that needs to be done. You go into a virtual account, okay, so it's a security product. I'll go into my security virtual account. In my smart account, I'll generate a registration token. I'll copy that token into the FMC, and then the FMC is going to register itself with the SSM. And then whatever licenses that I need can be requested. Now, the usefulness for this is, let's just suppose an RMA case, okay? In our legacy devices, when you would RMA.
Sorry, I have a question on the, like, I'm registering the FMC on, on a particular account. So, like I have malware license, firewall threat and base license, and like five type of licensing.
Right.
So just like I have FMC, so like 3 or 4 FMC, just imagine. So if I am registering one FMC to on smart account. So those all 4 type of license just I purchased, all will be synced with this particular FMC, na?
It will depend upon how many licenses the FMC is requesting. If the FMC is requesting all 5, then all 5 licenses will be utilized. If the FMC is requesting only 2 of those licenses, then only 2 of those licenses will be consumed.
So we can customize that, like one of my FMC is like only for 13, and second one like for voice or malware, and then it will be will sync with it.
Right.
We have to do that, na?
Correct. So you can choose what features you want on a particular firewall, and then depending upon that, the FMC will request only those licenses.
So for this, we require only one account, one organization.
Right. Just a single smart account, virtual account. You generate the token. So you can either generate a single token and use it multiple times, or you can use different tokens for different FMCs. It will work either of those ways.
Okay.
Okay. Right, so you copy it into the FMC and then it registers. Okay, so that's the only thing that's really required in terms of licensing. Okay, now in terms of actual licensing, there are 4 different types of licenses that are needed. I would say 5. Okay, one of them is kind of like permanent, you don't really need it. So one is base license. Okay, and this base license, this is basically included anytime you have an FMC or a secure firewall. Okay, you don't need to purchase it, you don't need to do anything, it already comes pre-installed with your devices. Chassis only, not virtual. Okay, for virtual, you would need to have base licenses as well, purchased. Okay, so base, I would call it perpetual. Okay, because that's not the correct spelling for perpetual. Perpetual, right? Basically means these are permanent licenses. Okay, and this is for hardware only. Rest of the licenses are term-based. Okay, and when I say term-based, basically means subscription. Okay, so you can either get.
Could you please explain the like use of features of base licensing? Like hardware chassis, I'm registering with FMC. I think one of them for base license.
Yes, so it would already have the base licensing. So base licensing gives you the very basic capabilities. Okay, so for example, NAT configuration, routing and switching, and any sort of user and application control. That's it. You won't be able to create any policies. You won't be able to do any malware. You won't be able to do any URL, etc.
Okay.
Okay, so basic features, NAT, routing and switching. Okay, let's say user and AVC. Okay, that's it, nothing else. So you won't be able to create any policies. You basically won't be able to use the firewall like a firewall.
Yes, sir. I have the confusion on that. Like now, AVC, user and AVC, application visibility. Just application. What exactly meaning of application visibility? Na? Here, if base license have the AVC, it's like application visibility, na? AVC.
Right. Application visibility. User and application.
So what exactly? What is the use of that? Like I have the only base license.
Right.
So how can perform the AVC purpose? That like what I'm thinking is application visibility is like it is the advanced feature.
So it won't let you create again. So if you just have the base policy, you won't be able to create the policies that are required to use it. But the firewall will have all the application detectors and all of those things that it requires to do the application visibility. You won't be able to use it, okay? But all the application detection and everything, that is functional and that is present in the device, okay? But you won't be able to create the policy and apply the policy to the firewalls, okay? The next type of or the next kind of like the important license is my threat license. Okay, this is term based, and whenever I say term based, it basically means that these licenses are subscription based, and you can get subscriptions for 1, 3, or 5 years. Okay, so they need to be constantly renewed before the end of those terms. Okay, so threat, it is term based. It enables my IPS IDS. Okay, it lets me to use my security intelligence. Okay, my policy and everything. Okay, the other type of license that we have is malware. This is again term based. With this, you basically get again your malware protection, okay, AMP, and you get access to threat grid as well. So threat grid is now basically called as secure malware analytics. It is a sandbox. Okay, we'll talk about this in much more detail when we'll discuss the malware component.
Okay, sir. Second one, I want to briefing of 3.8 license. So we don't have malware actually, license. So what actually threat license will do? It will work on predefined threat end that have a database that are malicious software.
Right.
It will do on new. I think it will do on only on the predefined threads, and it will work only on that.
Yes, so threat will only work on the predefined or the signature-based database. For the IPS IDS security intelligence, it will work only on that.
So what actually it did? If any malicious predefined malicious software is coming inside,
right?
So it will drop it, or it will send a message, send an alert. So what will be functionality of that time? It will come in pictures like threat. What actually license? What will do it like that?
It will depend upon your policy. If your policy says to drop malicious traffic, it will drop it. It will block it. If you say that it just needs to monitor it, it will monitor it. It will, if you configure the policy to say allow the malicious traffic, then it will allow it. It really depends upon what the policy that you have configured.
I think default configuration will be drop it, no? Deny.
Again, it depends on the configuration. Okay, so default, so there is no as such defaults to the access control policy. There is a default action that is configured, but you can configure it to either block, either allow, either inspect. So it can be any of those options. Okay.
Okay, and we also can configure the threat alert mail on the
right. Right, you can do that as well.
So actually, what we do have the environment is like one side is IT network and the corporate network, and other side is OT network, the industry network. Those systems don't have the antivirus and other things, so and outdated software. So that is the reason of my concern.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So malware license gives you the capability to, again, do the local analysis to detect, block, and analyze malware, specifically in files. And then if it's unknown, then it can also send it to the threat grid sandbox. But for that, you need the malware license. Then you have the URL filtering. This is to be able to use the categorization and the reputation based category and reputation URL database that is provided by Cisco. Okay, this is to allow for that. Okay, so URL filtering also requires threat license. Okay, so remember this. If you have URL filtering but you don't have threat, then you cannot use it because the threat license enables the access control. Okay, so without the access control, URL filtering will not work. So if you have to use URL filtering, you need to have threat license as well.
Sir, I just want to know a difference between this 3.8 and malware. So what my understanding is any malware, any malicious software will comes under this category, malware software. No?
Right. Malware also involves malware that is present in files.
Okay.
Okay. Any software, any Excel files, any PDF files, any maybe video files, any audio files. So it also involves that. Okay. The threat license will not be able to do malware protection for these files. So if you need to do malware protection for file-based malwares, you need to have the malware license. And it is also necessary for unknown malware as well. Threat license will not, threat license will not be able to protect or help with unknown malware.
So what I think is like threat license, any software, malicious software will entering from LAN side. So how it work? Like that, any malware, like you are saying that any files, any videos. So it will be in a form now, malicious software like in any files, any video. So you are saying that create license is not able to work on that.
Right.
So how create license work? Like how it analyze that signature base?
Through the IPS. So the threat can be also in the form of, let's say, fragmented packets containing payloads, okay, which might not necessarily be files, okay, just my regular payloads that can be malware in the layer 7. So IPS has known signature that can act on it. And then threat also gives you security intelligence and then access control policy, which is like the very basis of our firewall. So without the threat license, you won't be able to create the policies.
Okay. These are also required for IPS. And so, sir, what I'm understanding is like that create license does not do the DPI, deep packet inspection of all the packet, but it does only things that pre-signatures malicious software, it will deny or drop that one. If any software that are not pre-signatures coming in form of malware, it will not drop that one.
More or less, yes. So it can do DPI. So anytime you see IPS IDS, it is able to do deep packet inspection. Okay. But this is for known signatures. Okay. This is for file-based malware and also zero-day or unknown malware.
Okay. So I'm just confusing that you are saying that these are the file-based. Now, what is the difference between malware and threat in the point of like file-based? I am not able to understand that. What actually this is file-based.
So when I say file-based, so let's say a user downloads an encrypted zip folder.
Okay.
Right? That's file-based.
Okay.
Right? So without the malware, the firewall will not be able to unencrypt that zip folder, open that zip folder, and inspect what's present in that file.
Oh, and any file you can send that in zip file. If I do have create license on a firewall, so that file can easily enter in the LAN network.
Right.
Okay. So what it will stop, like create license? So any example that it will drop?
Let's say, for example, if you have, or if someone, let's say, is sending fragmented packets.
Okay.
So you can configure the IPS and IDS to, if there are any overlapping fragments, or maybe there are any DOS attacks, or any RAID-based attacks. Maybe your firewall is getting a lot of TCP SYN packets. Okay. So a lot of these are also threats. Okay. Threat is not just software and malware. Okay. A lot of these things are also threats for the network, for the firewall.
Yes. Okay, so just we are like license part we are finishing here. We do have in like next classes on licensing.
Right, we'll be starting with we'll be covering a lot of this in much more detail. I just have one more license to talk about, is the AnyConnect.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll end the class today.
Okay. Thank you.
So the last license that is there is AnyConnect, and you need this to enable remote access VPN. Functionality. Okay. There are different ways or different, I would say 3 different types of AnyConnect licenses that we have. We have Plus, Apex, and there is AnyConnect only, or let me just say VPN only. Okay, depending upon what you are trying to do or what features you really want to have within the AnyConnect, then you can choose to have either of these licenses. Okay, so these are all licenses that are really required or that go within the within our firewall. Okay. Any other questions anyone has? Okay. So yeah, if there are no more questions, then we'll end it today. We actually did extend it quite a bit, but that's fine. Okay. So so next week or from next week, we will be basically having 2.5 hour classes. Okay. Over the weekends. All right. And then from next week, we are going to go into the lab, do a lot of different things, see how the firewalls function, and try to understand a lot of the functionality from the firewall. And the more questions that you guys present, obviously, it helps for everyone to get a bit more understanding. I can share some best practices around things which you might be seeing in production as well, and you would want to discuss. Okay, so let's keep the conversations going, healthy conversations. They're really very useful.